Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt, this Team Chicago Challenge, but because of the election coming up in Chicago, and like I have said, I look at my Chicago audience as the smartest audience out there. I have to do a show about the election coming up in Chicago. This is a very important election. It's very critical. And that's why I'm taking this time to talk about this election. There are 5 candidates running for mayor of Chicago. And I'll tell you, we have to talk about one thing, and that's Rahm Emanuel, who is the mayor. So let me say one thing about our mayor, Rahm Emanuel. I believe he is worse than the dirtiest hillbilly sheriff in the dirtiest county in the South, hiding behind some billboard, setting up a speed trap. Yes, we have a mayor who is worse than the worst dirty hillbilly sheriff in the South. Him, Rahm Emanuel, is just like whoever you want to talk about. Any dirty, evil sheriff in the South, that's what he's worse than. These speed traps that he is setting up in Chicago are evil. No matter how you cut it, how you look at it, this is all bad stuff. It all began with the stoplight cameras that were put in, a good number were put in by Richard M. Daley, another scumbag as far as I'm concerned, because he's a thief, out and out thief. And one of these days I'm going to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he robbed the people of Chicago with the parking meter deal. I will prove that. But right now, let's talk about the election coming up in February, the end of February. It's our opportunity, even though we're going to look at all the candidates, but let me explain a little bit about Mr. Mayor and Mr. Hillbilly Speed Trap Mayor that we have in the city of Chicago. What I talk about in the South, in the 50s and the 60s, people from the North hated driving in the South because you'd come into some little town, the speed limit dropped down to 20 miles an hour, 15, 10, 30, whatever, and there would be a dirty sheriff hiding behind a billboard ready to write someone a ticket. And because you're out of state, it would cost you a pretty penny back in those days. Well, nowadays, with the stoplight cameras and the speeding cameras that he has set up, believe me, it is the worst. And I'm going to give you one example. Right by, and I think they did this because I live over here, right here at Lawrence and Cicero. There is a little park, and I think that little street is Keating, maybe Giddings. There's a little park. I'm going to show you the park. It's no bigger than 50 feet wide by 100 feet deep. It's a little play lot. And yet they probably got more signs warning you about the speed trap that they're set up. The signs themselves may take up more room than the park itself. This is all evil stuff. All evil stuff. Putting in speed traps in Chicago may be the most evil thing this mayor has ever done. But let's get back to this park. So this park, you can't even see the park from Lawrence Avenue. And yet they have these signs up. And they got viaducts on both ends of this little speed trap. So there's no residents, there's no kids that are going to be crossing the street in this particular area, and yet they bring the speed limit down to 25 miles an hour. This is all dirty stuff. This is as dirty as the speed bumps. I'm going to show you a little bit of speed bumps in case you don't know what I'm talking about, speed bumps if you don't drive, but all over the city. And these people in the neighborhoods think, ooh, I'll call my alderman and I'll get some speed bumps, because the reason people are driving, I'm one of them, I take side streets, because the main streets are no longer main streets. The average person in Chicago, if you drive, you are wasting anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 minutes every day, time out of your life, sitting in traffic in Chicago. They have traffic engineers, I don't know what schools they go to, what kind of degree they have, but they have traffic engineers in Chicago that are clueless about what traffic engineering means. To get traffic to flow, That is not what happens in Chicago. It's not have traffic flow. They don't want any traffic to flow. This hurts all the businesses. This is one reason you see businesses leaving Chicago, besides the major problem when they, back in the 70s, when they drove all the manufacturing out of Chicago. The Democratic Party, Richard J. Daley and the Democratic Party drove all the manufacturing jobs out of Chicago back in 1974 with the head tax. But that's a whole other subject. We're going to stick to the traffic thing. So if you're a driver in Chicago and you're the person who's paying for these streets, you're the person that's paying tax on your gasoline. In Chicago there's 5 cents tax. In Cook County there's another 5 cents tax. The state of Illinois has their highway tax that you pay with your gasoline. And then you have the federal tax that you pay when you buy your gasoline. All this money is supposed to be paying for the highways, which we are paying. Plus, if you add in your city sticker, you pay some of the highest prices in the country for a city sticker living in Chicago. And what are they doing with the streets in Chicago? They're turning half the streets over to the bicycle people. It's all evil. If you drive in Chicago, if you're a resident of Chicago like me, I'm a lifelong resident, I've been paying taxes my entire life. It's evil stuff. I can remember when you could drive on Fullerton Avenue. I remember when you could drive on Foster Avenue. If you just obeyed the speed limit, if you just drove 28, 29 miles an hour, you would make all the lights. Fullerton Avenue, this is God's truth. God can strike me down if I'm lying. Back in the 70s, you could go drive from Narragansett Avenue all the way to Western Avenue on Fullerton Avenue, make every single light if you drove the speed limit. They used to coordinate. They used to have the lights synchronized. Well, if you talk to a traffic engineer now, they don't even have a clue what you're talking about. I don't know what colleges these people. If I was the mayor, I'd fire the entire department. And I met some of these morons over at the Copernicus Center when they had the meeting about Milwaukee. Here's Milwaukee Avenue. Here's this beautiful boulevard, as you're seeing right now. This beautiful, nice boulevard. When I was a kid growing up, you would go down. When you got to Foster Avenue and Milwaukee Avenue, it was like being in the suburbs. You'd be nice, beautiful boulevard, and at the end of the boulevard, there was Superdog right there at Devon Avenue. These great memories that I have are all being destroyed because of the Democratic Party of Cook County, the Rahm Emanuels. All this stuff is being destroyed. So if you're an average driver, not only are they taxing you out the nose, they're stealing your streets from you, they're narrowing it down, putting all kinds of stuff in the streets. And then on top of it, besides the traffic light cameras, which now the goofballs, you know, Rahm and all his goofy buddies, now they're changing the yellow light from 3 seconds down to 2 seconds, hoping that they catch you. It's just like the speeding camera. They're setting up like here's a good example, Jefferson Park. They got cameras on Lawrence Avenue, they got cameras on Higgins. Does Rahm Emanuel and John Arena, who was the alderman, do they really think that the kids in Jefferson Park are that stupid that they can't cross the street? I mean, if your kids, if you live in those neighborhoods, if you live in Jefferson Park, Mayfair, they honestly think your kids are so stupid. I mean, how did we get by all these years? There was stop signs everywhere. And we all survived. Kids were not being hit in the street all the time. No, this is all evil stuff. This is all stuff to generate revenue. This is all stuff to screw with the people who live in Chicago. So if you're a driver, if you love to drive like me, if you have to drive, well, you have to drive to work if you work in the suburbs. If you have to drive to work, then you got to understand what I'm talking about. And I'm sure, because you don't see Rahm Emanuel around much, he probably is sitting in behind those TV consoles and he's watching. He's probably counting the money. He's probably so happy. Where's all their money go? I mean, how is anybody watching the money? How about the people doing the signs? Who's got the sign contract? Is that a special little public-private deal between Rahm Emanuel? And we don't have anybody looking into it. The Tribune, the Sun-Times have given them, Rahm Emanuel, Richard M. Daley, a complete pass over the years. ABC, NBC, CBS. Is anybody really watching these people? I mean, believe me. And then the stealing of your street. You are paying. You're a motorist. You have been buying gas. You've been paying for these roads all these years. And now, little by little, they're trying to take it away. Like on Milwaukee Avenue, they want to make it one lane each direction, which will tie you up even longer. And they're going to give the bicycles all this. There's no bicycle ride. Maybe, what, one every hour? Are the bicycle riders so stupid? If you ride a bicycle, are you so ignorant that you need so much space to ride your bicycle? Is there something mentally wrong with you? So that's number one. Speed bumps, another goofy thing. That's number two. And let me tell you another thing about these getting tickets going through. If you have money, oh, let's mention something else. So Rahm Emanuel and his cohorts, you know, whether it's John Arena or any of these other aldermen that agree with him on these lights, they think you're stupid. You live in Mayfair, you live in Jefferson Park, you live in Dunning, you live in, what other neighborhood, Portage Park, and they all think you're stupid. They think your kids are stupid. But if you have a little bit more money and you live in Edgebrook, or you live in Edison Park, or you live in Sauganash, or if you live in Beverly, they don't have any speed cameras. Isn't that amazing? If you live in the west side, Pulaski Avenue from Armitage all the way to, oh, I don't know, 63rd Street, there's a speed trap every other mile. So if you're a poor black schlub on the west side, or if you're Hispanic, if you're Puerto Rican, they're after you too. And remember, if you're a citizen, and you're an upstanding citizen that takes care, you're going to be paying. But because we're a sanctuary city, if you're illegal, if you overstayed your visa, you don't have to worry about paying because they don't care if you live in Chicago. We really have to do something and get rid of this Rahm Emanuel. But the other candidates, I don't have anything too great. But let me just think. So, like I said, if you're black, if you're white, if you're Hispanic, and you're legal, if you've got your green card, if you're an American citizen, if you're Puerto Rican, if you're Korean, how many of these Koreans living over here on Lawrence Avenue got to go through that little speed trap every time they want to get on the expressway? I mean, does Rahm hate the Koreans too? Is he trying to set up this little speed trap, or is it just for me? If you believe in the Constitution of the United States, if you believe that the state has no right to take your money without you being brought before a judge, then all this traffic thing is all unconstitutional, dirty, it's all criminal, it's all bad. And even when Quinn, right before he left, he signed another law that if you get a ticket, you can plead guilty. So we don't tie up the court system. That was Mr. Quinn's idea. Don't tie up the court system. The court system is for us, for the average schlub, the average working class guy. You think I am happy to turn over $100 just because I might have went through a yellow light? Do you think we should just turn that money over? We should just plead guilty? We don't have the right to face our accusers? This is all bad stuff. If you're happy with hillbilly sheriff Rahm Emanuel with his speed traps, okay, then you're happy. There's nothing more that I can say. But like I said, it's all evil. Speed traps are evil. If they would bring in the street, but Rahm, he doesn't know how to bring in the street. They don't quite know what. Rahm Emanuel wouldn't even know the difference between a lathe and a mill. He wouldn't know the difference between a torque wrench and a crescent wrench. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry these people are so ill-educated that they can't even talk to industry, to bring industry back in Chicago. But that's a whole different subject. So let me talk about a couple of the other candidates. I got to give everybody a little free time, equal time. All right. So then there's Bob Fioretti, who is an alderman, I think, the 2nd Ward. He's a friend of my brother Mike. Mike says, oh, you should go work with him. You should go. Like, I don't need a job. I'm not looking for a job to work with a half-wit commie like this alderman that's running. I mean, let me point out the two things, the reasons I disagree with the alderman from, I believe, the 2nd Ward. Let me put his name up. Bob. All right. First of all, he's talking about a suburban transit tax, a head tax, another anti-business head tax, another tax to drive more companies out of Chicago, to drive more jobs out of Chicago. Don't these guys learn their lesson? I mean, he could have called me up. I could have explained to him about the head tax. This is all evil stuff. So, head tax, suburban head tax is evil, totally evil. And then the other thing he stands for is $15 an hour minimum wage, which is totally goofy. These Democrats, well, we want to build the middle class. We want to, you're going to put half these people, look, if you drive around Chicago, you see these young guys, they got their pants hanging down around, 10 inches off their rump, like they want to go to prison. I mean, like they want to have some prison relationship and they're ready to go to prison. That's why they got their pants hanging down. They're not even worth $5 an hour if anybody was going to hire them by the time you straighten them all out. 15, that they'll never get a job. And people that are working at McDonald's, I am sorry. It's the Democratic Party of Cook County, the Dailies, even Harold Washington did not want to do anything about the head tax, so don't tell me anything about Harold Washington. He didn't want to do anything about the head tax either. These companies were leaving Chicago because it was so evil to tax a company to hire people. It's evil. So the head tax drove all the factory jobs out, because if you worked at McDonald's and you were a high school student, you'd work a year or so, if you're still at McDonald's 7 years later and you're only making $8 an hour, you better look in the mirror. You should be manager of that McDonald's. You should be running that McDonald's if you've been there 7, 8 years. So everybody complained the only jobs available are these fast food jobs, these low-paying jobs, because of the Democratic Party of Cook County. That's why there was no good jobs. They drove them all out. Get this through your noggin. You vote for the Democrats, you're voting against your best interests. So $15 an hour means, what it really means is, that's what he thinks everybody should be making, and everybody should take a pay cut so that we're all equal. So we all could be nice little commies, and maybe we could wear our Nehru jackets, and we could, like President Obama when he went over there with the Chinese, that was nice seeing him in his Mao jacket with the communist SOB leader from China and Putin right next to them, and they all got their Mao jackets on. Is that what they want, us all to be good party members and at $15 an hour? That will end up being the top pay, not the bottom pay. Minimum pay, minimum wage is a bad, bad idea. Now let's go next to Chewy Jesus Garcia. All right, there's a couple of things. I went through his website, I'm looking around. Everything he says is everything everybody wants to hear. He says no more school closings, no more charter schools. He wants to cut down the charter schools. He wants to reduce testing. He wants 1,000 new cops and everything. But, he's part of the problem. He's part of the party. And I'm sorry that he knows nothing about business and how to bring business back. So do I think he's an example of someone I want to be the mayor of Chicago? If you want everything to be, if you don't want your kids to have good jobs, then he's as good as Bob here and as good as Rahm here. So your choices aren't that great. Then the other candidate still on is Doc Walls. And on his website, he's got some fantastic figures on there. He wants to spend $600 million to get to rebuild Chicago. Public, and he keeps referring to it, public-private entities, public-private enterprise. That's just like the communist playbook, public-private. Even Hillary Clinton, I hear her now. Oh, we can bring business back with a public-private. We need government to help. No. What makes America great, get this in your noggin, what makes America great is people going out and starting businesses. People scraping together and starting business. You don't need the government interference. Sure, I believe that businesses shouldn't be polluting and anything else, but this is 2015 America. As they've proven with the fracking. Fracking can be done clean. The pipeline is the cleanest, most beneficial way to move oil. And yet, our dear president is still opposed to the pipeline running oil from Canada, our good neighbors to the north, or maybe he doesn't like our neighbors to the north. This is all, believe me, we are living in maybe the most insane situation there's ever been in the 200-some-year history of America. This may be worse, but who writes history? But look around. When you see all these businesses closing, and they talk about the economy's coming back, the stock market, yeah, the stock market is doing great, but you got the Fed are dropping $60 billion every month into the stock market. No, nothing is the way it should be. Okay, so dock walls sounds nice, but we can't afford $600 million. We get to the last guy, and he's a friend of Rauner, and that's Willie Wilson. But the one problem with Willie Wilson, he thinks he's Rauner. If you remember the last campaign, Rauner never really mentioned anything he's going to do. So we're only praying. I'm only praying. I hope Mr. Rauner will meet with me, because I'm also a motorcyclist, and maybe I can influence him. Listen to me, I got some great ideas for the city of Chicago. Willie Wilson has absolutely nothing on his website about where he stands. The one thing he did say, and I may end up voting for Willie Wilson, he said we need to open Meigs Field again. And the meaning behind that, and I hope he understands, and he's a successful businessman. He's owned McDonald's. You want to talk about McDonald's, minimum wage? Here's a guy that knows about building business. He said, open Meigs Field. Meigs Field would send a message to everybody in the country that Chicago is open for business again. You need to bring in business. You need people to want to start business. Back in the old, now you go to McCormick Place, in eyesight of where Meigs Field used to be. Do you know there used to be corporate leaders would come, have their convention right there at McCormick Place, take customers out on the veranda, take potential customers and look over on Meigs Field and say, that's my jet. And they'd be so proud that they could fly into Chicago, land their jet, go to the convention. Now you go by McCormick Place, 99% of the time it's a ghost town. We need business. We need a proper attitude, just like what I'm saying about traffic. We need traffic to flow in Chicago. We need it all to work together. The one reason for government is to help business. If you want people to have good jobs, you want people to be homeowners, you want people to advance, you want people to have their kids have good jobs. You don't need to go to college to have a good job. There's hundreds of great jobs. We need to bring back trades in the trade schools. We need to have shop classes in probably every high school. We need to teach people common skills. So many people are graduating, don't even have a clue about a checking account, a savings account. We are failing our kids in many, many ways, and it goes right back to leadership. When was the last time Rahm Emanuel gave a good speech about bringing industry back to Chicago? It's not even in his mind. Sure, he brought in Boeing, brought in some office people for Boeing. Boeing wanted to get out of Washington. But if you look at the big picture, we need to bring back manufacturing. For every new plant that might hire 4,000, 3,000 people, there's another 50 small plants that are going to supply parts to that big plant. That's how you get things going. And we need leadership that understands business. So like I said, I hope Rounder can change the attitude in Illinois. And Rahm Emanuel, just because he's such a dirty, filthy, hillbilly sheriff, he wants to be the hillbilly sheriff with his little speed traps to finance Chicago and his own public-private financing that he's getting stuff done in Chicago, but nobody knows. Tribune sometimes, what interest rate, what kind of deals is he making? Believe me, this is bad stuff, this is evil stuff, and if it's just the traffic cameras, if it's just the speed trap is enough to make you think that things are not quite right, I hope you agree with me. And if you don't agree with me, that's okay too. But you'll end up in the long run suffering, because one day you'll be driving along and a speed camera is going to catch you whether you know it or not, because next thing you know, there'll be a and every time I look at these speed cameras, I think that they're alien. I almost think of that evil eye in War of the Worlds, that snake eye coming around in the building. Look at these cameras. Have we been invaded? Is Rahm Emanuel part of this alien takeover? Okay, I'm Dan Schmitt. Remember my website, teamchicago.tv. My political website is walkwithdan.com. I hope you enjoyed the show.